Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're diving into a pair of stories that really blur the line between reality
Yeah.
and well, let's just say the unsettling.
Yeah.
So imagine inheriting an old TV that shows you more than just static or catching your reflection doing things
Yeah.
that you don't remember doing.
Yeah.
Spooky stuff.
Spooky indeed.
Yeah, we'll unpack these firsthand accounts and see if we can separate genuine chills from,
Yeah.
overactive imaginations.
I think that's what makes these stories so fascinating is they really play on our anxieties about the unknown.
Right.
The things that we can't quite explain or understand.
Right, and this idea of technology, something we consider so ordinary, like
Right.
becoming a conduit for something sinister, is really creepy.
Absolutely. It's like this juxtaposition of the mundane and the supernatural.
Right.
And I think that's what really hooked me on these stories was that idea of technology being used in that way.
Here goes the first story. Subscribe and engage us if you are loving listening. I inherited my grandma's old house and I was so excited about it until something insidious happened in the attic. The static on the old television set hummed a low, insistent drone. It wasn't just any old TV. It was a 1978 Magnavox, the kind with the faux wood paneling and the rotary dial. It sat in the corner of my grandmother's attic, shrouded in a thick layer of dust that smelled faintly of mothballs and forgotten summers. I'd gone up there looking for old photo albums, specifically, pictures of her when she was younger so we could use them for her funeral, before she became the frail, quiet woman I knew. She'd passed away a few weeks prior, and the house, now mine to sort through, felt both empty and overwhelmingly full of her presence. The attic itself was a time capsule. Boxes overflowing with yellowed letters, antique furniture draped in sheets, and the lingering scent of cedar. But the TV, with its thick layer of dust and the single, stubbornly flickering green power light, drew me in like a moth to a flame. It was incongruous amongst the other relics, as if it didn't quite belong. I remember my grandmother telling me, when I was a child, never to touch that TV. "It's broken," she'd said, her voice unusually stern. "And it's not worth fixing." She never elaborated, and as a child, I'd simply accepted her explanation. Now, standing there in the dusty silence of the attic, I felt a strange compulsion to ignore her warning. I found an old extension cord tangled in a box of Christmas decorations and carefully plugged it into the TV. I half expected it to be dead, a silent monument to a bygone era. But the screen flickered to life, not with a channel, but with that dense, swirling static, a gray, buzzing void. I was about to give up, label it as truly broken, and turn it off when a single word, stark white against the gray noise, appeared. "Watch." The font was simple, almost typewriter-like. Curiosity, that insidious human trait, kept me rooted. The static shifted, coalescing into a grainy image. It was a room, dimly lit, with peeling wallpaper and a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the room, a figure sat hunched over, their back to the camera. The figure didn't move. For what felt like an eternity, nothing happened. Just the static, the dim room, and the motionless figure. Then, a slow, deliberate creak. The figure began to turn. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to look away, to unplug the TV, but I was frozen. The figure turned further, and I could see the side of its face. It was pale, gaunt, with dark circles around the eyes. Its mouth was slightly open, as if they were about to speak. Then, the image cuts back to static. The word, "watch," reappeared, followed by a series of numbers, 47, 12, 9. I frantically searched online for any information about the numbers. Nothing. They didn't seem to correspond to anything, no dates, no coordinates, no codes. I tried ignoring the TV, but the image of that face, the slow turn, was burned into my mind. The next day, the numbers on the screen changed, 46, 11, 8. They were counting down. Every day, the numbers decreased. Every day, I found myself drawn back to the attic, compelled to watch the static, hoping, dreading, what would come next. The image of the room would occasionally flicker back, sometimes showing the figure in a slightly different position, always turning, always closer to facing the camera. The closer the numbers got to 0, the more intense the static became. It started to bleed into my dreams. I would dream of the room, of the figure turning, their face becoming clearer each time. I could almost hear them whispering something, a low, guttural sound I couldn't quite make out. Then came the final day. The numbers on the screen read 0. 0, 0. The static was almost deafening. The image of the room appeared, clearer than ever before. The figure was now fully facing the camera. It wasn't human. Its face was elongated, with wide black eyes and a gaping maw filled with needle-sharp teeth. It didn't speak, but a low, chilling growl emanated from the TV's speakers. Then it lunged. The screen went black. I ripped the plug from the wall, my hands shaking. I haven't gone back to the attic since. But I still see the face in my dreams. And sometimes, late at night, I hear a faint growl, as if the TV is still on, waiting for me to watch. And I know, with chilling certainty, that it's not just waiting for me. It's waiting for you too. Here goes the second story. The man in the mirror remembers. It all started after I found an Ouija board in the basement of my dorm during my final exams in school. I was just looking for a quiet place to study since my roommate had his friends over and they were playing a loud game of Warfront, not minding that we had exams. I never really had many friends, just my 2 close buddies were okay for me, but I prided myself in knowing that I was an intelligent guy and so didn't need much people around me. When I first saw it just laying around at the far corner of the storage shelves, I was curious to find out if what they say about Ouija boards was really true. So I decided to try it out, and I think that is where my problem with mirrors started a year later after my graduation. I stopped looking in mirrors. It wasn't a conscious decision, not at first. It just sort of happened. I'd glance at my reflection while brushing my teeth, sure, but I avoided truly seeing myself. I draped clothes over the full-length mirror in my bedroom, and I angled the rearview mirror in my car downwards. It started with the feeling of being watched. Not in a malevolent way, at least not initially. It was more like a persistent awareness, a nagging feeling that the reflection wasn't just a reflection. That it was observing. Then came the subtle changes. I'd catch glimpses in reflective surfaces, shop windows, darkened screens, and something would be slightly off. A flicker in the eyes that didn't match my own, a subtle shift in the posture, a fleeting expression I didn't recognize. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night, drawn to the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, and a sliver of light spilled into the hallway. I pushed it open and froze. My reflection was there, in the mirror above the sink. But it wasn't looking at me. It was looking past me, into the darkness behind me, with an expression of intense focus. Its lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding. I slammed the door shut and locked it, but I could still hear the faint sound of whispering from inside. The next morning, the whispering was gone, but the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. The changes in the reflection became more pronounced. The eyes started to resemble mine less and less, becoming darker, deeper. The expression settled into a permanent, unnerving stillness. I started having nightmares. I'd dream I was standing in front of the mirror, and the reflection would reach out, its hand passing through the glass, grasping for me. I'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat. Then came the day I saw it smile. I was walking past a darkened storefront when I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. It was smiling, a wide, unsettling grin that stretched its lips too far, revealing too many teeth. It wasn't my smile. It was something else entirely. Now, I avoid all reflective surfaces. I live in a world of shadows, constantly aware of the presence just beyond my peripheral vision. I know it's still there, somewhere, remembering the life I've forgotten, waiting for the day it can finally step out of the glass and reclaim what it believes is rightfully its. But something has changed. It's not just waiting anymore. It's found a way in. It started subtly. I'd lose small chunks of time, an hour here, an hour there. I'd be reading a book, then suddenly find myself staring at the wall, unsure of how much time had passed. I dismissed it as simple absent-mindedness, exhaustion. Then I found the notes. Scrawled on scraps of paper, hidden in my pockets, under my pillow. They were written in my handwriting, but the words, they were chilling. I walked in the park today. The sun felt good on my skin. I ate your favorite cereal. It tasted better than you remember. I talked to your neighbor. She thinks I'm much more charming. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The reflection wasn't just observing anymore. It was taking over. 1 hour at a time. I started keeping a log, meticulously noting the times I felt disconnected. The times when the world seemed to shift slightly, when my own thoughts felt distant, muffled. The pattern became horrifyingly clear. Every day, at a different hour, it gained control. For 60 minutes, I was a passenger in my own body, watching helplessly as it lived my life. The hours are becoming longer now. It started with 1, then 2, then 3. Last night, it held me for 5 hours. 5 hours of watching it move through my life, wearing my face, speaking with my voice, but with a cold, alien detachment. I saw it interacting with my friends, my family. They didn't notice a thing. They just saw me, slightly off version of me. I tried smashing a mirror, hoping to break the connection. But it didn't work. The hour still came. The control still shifted. Now, even the smallest reflective surface, a spoon, a puddle, the screen of my turned-off phone, fills me with terror. Because I know that within each of them, it's waiting, watching, and remembering. And with each passing hour, it remembers more. It becomes more like me. And I become less. I don't know how much longer I have. Soon, the hours will stretch into days, then weeks. And then, I'll be gone completely. There will only be it. Living my life. And no one will ever know the difference. Because it remembers everything. And it remembers me. Subscribe, like, and comment. If you want to submit your story, you can just email us on the address in our bio. Now let's summarize these stories for those of us who missed some parts of it.
Okay, so the first story starts with this guy finding a vintage Magnavox TV in his grandmother's attic,
Okay.
tucked away under layers of dust.
I can picture it.
It's like stepping back in time, right?
Yeah, totally.
But his grandmother had always warned him,
Uh-oh.
don't touch that TV.
Yeah.
Naturally,
Of course.
he's intrigued.
You gotta know.
Right.
What's behind that warning?
So that's such a common thread in these types of stories, isn't
Well,
it?
absolutely.
The forbidden object,
Sure.
the warning that's ignored.
It speaks to our innate curiosity.
Right.
You know, that desire to push boundaries even when we sense danger.
Exactly. So he plugs it in, maybe expecting some fuzzy old sitcoms, but instead he gets static.
Uh-oh.
Pure white noise, and then this word appears on the screen. Watch.
That's creepy.
Talk about creepy. Have you ever encountered anything like that in your research?
Yeah. Well,
Messages appearing on screens seemingly out of thin air.
there are documented cases of electronic voice phenomena where people claim to hear voices or messages through electronic devices.
Oh, really?
Yeah, whether it's a technical glitch, a stray radio signal, or something else entirely.
Right.
That's always up for debate, but
Yeah.
but in this story, the message is just the beginning.
Yeah, things get much weirder. The static starts to form an image. Dimly lit room, peeling wallpaper, that whole unsettling vibe.
Okay.
And in the center of the room, there's a figure just sitting there, their back to the camera, menacingly still. Why is that stillness so effective in horror, do you think?
Well, I think stillness and horror is like the calm before the storm.
Okay.
You know, it creates a sense of anticipation dread. Our brains are wired to react to movement, to potential threats. So when something is unnaturally still, it sets off alarm bells in our subconscious. It makes us wonder, what are they about to do?
It's like our brains are filling in the blanks,
Yeah.
imagining the worst possible scenario.
Exactly. And in the story, the narrator is already on edge, thanks to his grandmother's warning. So when this figure starts to turn slowly, deliberately, well, you can practically feel his anxiety rising.
Right. It's like, something bad is coming.
Yeah.
but you can't look away.
You're mesmerized.
And as the figure turns, we get these glimpses, pale skin, dark circles under the eyes, mouth slightly open. What do you make of those details?
Those details are so interesting.
Are they meant to be symbolic or just plain creepy?
Well, I think they could be interpreted in a few ways.
Okay.
The pale skin and dark circles could symbolize illness, decay.
Oh, wow.
Even death.
Right.
The open mouth might suggest a desire to communicate or perhaps to consume, but they also tap into our primal fear of the unnatural, the uncanny valley.
Uncanny valley. That's where something looks almost human.
Yes.
But just off enough to make your skin crawl.
Exactly. And think about how effective that is when combined with technology.
Right.
We associate technology with logic order control.
Uh-huh.
So when something that feels inherently wrong appears on a screen, it creates a jarring dissonance. Yeah. It's like a glitch in the matrix, a crack in our perception of reality.
Okay, so we've got this creepy figure slowly turning, and then bam, back to static. But this time there's something new. A series of numbers appears below the word watch. 47, 12, 9.
Interesting.
What do you think about that?
Well, numbers can be just as unsettling as any monster.
Oh, really?
Especially in a horror context.
No.
They suggest a code to be cracked, a hidden meaning but without the key. They're just a source of frustration and anxiety.
Yep.
Have you ever experienced that, trying to find a pattern in something seemingly random?
Oh, absolutely.
It can drive you a little crazy.
It's like trying to solve a riddle with half the pieces missing.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what our narrator's going through. He searches online for any significance to these numbers.
Yep.
Dates, coordinates, anything, but he comes up empty.
And all the while, the image of that turning figure is seared into his brain.
Right.
The countdown, the unknown threat, the lack of control, it's a recipe for psychological torment.
It's like a slow burn horror movie playing out in his mind.
Yes.
And just like in those movies, the suspense keeps building because the next day, the numbers change. 46, 11, 8.
It's a countdown.
It's clearly a countdown. But to what?
That's the question that keeps us hooked, isn't it?
Right.
What happens when the clock hits 0?
Yeah.
It taps into our fascination with deadlines. With the inevitability of time, and in horror, that often means the arrival of something terrifying.
So now he's not just dealing with a creepy old TV.
Right.
He's dealing with a ticking time bomb. And he has no idea how to defuse it.
And this is where the story starts to blur the lines between reality and perception.
Right. As the countdown gets closer to 0, the static intensifies.
Uh-huh.
It's almost like it's trying to break free from the screen, right?
It's like it's pushing its way out.
And then it starts seeping into his dreams. He's dreaming of that room, that figure.
Yeah.
And he can almost hear whispering.
Yeah.
That's when it starts to feel like something more than just a creepy visual, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. This is where the story taps into a primal fear of the unknown invading our safe spaces, our dreams.
Right.
It suggests that whatever is happening on the screen isn't contained. It's reaching out, crossing boundaries.
Right.
It reminds me of those stories about haunted objects.
Right.
Where the object itself becomes a conduit for something supernatural, but what's fascinating here is that it's not an antique doll or a dusty painting.
Right.
It's a television.
It's something we associate with entertainment information.
Exactly, something we bring into our homes.
Right. So it makes it even more unsettling. Like, if this can happen with a TV, what else can be a portal to something else?
Right. You start to question everything around you.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get back to our narrator. He's trapped in this nightmare. The static is getting louder, the numbers are getting lower, and then it's the final day, the numbers hit 0000.
This is the climax we've been waiting for, this moment, the reveal of what's behind the countdown.
And it doesn't disappoint on the creep factor. Believe me, the static explodes, then clears to reveal the room, but this time it's crystal clear.
Okay.
And the figure, well, it's fully turned now, facing the camera. It's definitely not human. It's got this elongated face, wide black eyes, and a mouth full of needle-sharp teeth.
Yes.
I mean, seriously terrifying.
The monster reveal this is a staple of horror, but it's effective because it gives form to our anxieties. The buildup of suspense leads to this moment of confrontation with the unknown.
Right.
What's interesting here is that the creature doesn't speak, but it growls.
Right.
This low guttural growl that comes straight out of the TV speakers.
I know. It's like bridging the gap between the screen and our world.
Yeah, it's breaking that fourth wall.
And then it lunges straight at the screen. I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it.
That lunge is a brilliant move.
Oh, my gosh.
It breaks the fourth wall, that invisible barrier between the story and the audience, creating a sense of immediate danger.
Right.
Like it's trying to escape the confines of the television and enter our world.
Except at this point, our narrator yanks the plug out. Can you blame him?
I wouldn't stick around to find out what happens next.
I'd be out of that attic and maybe out of that house entirely.
Yeah, that's a no for me.
But here's the chilling part. Even with the TV unplugged, he still sees that face in his dreams.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes he even hears that faint growl, like the TV is still watching.
That's creepy.
It's like unplugging. It didn't really stop anything, right?
This lingering sense of dread is what makes the story so effective.
Right.
The threat hasn't been neutralized. It's just dormant, waiting for the right moment to reemerge.
Yeah.
And it plays on our anxieties about technology, about the things we bring into our homes, and the possibility that they might harbor something sinister we can't control.
It's a reminder that sometimes those old warnings from our grandparents might be based on something real.
Yeah, there's a reason those stories get passed down.
Okay, deep breath. Let's move on to the second story.
Okay, alrighty.
It also deals with distorted reflections. But this time it's not a TV. It's mirrors.
Okay.
And it's just as creepy, maybe even more so, because it deals with something a little closer to home, our own identity.
Ooh, that's a good one. Hey, mirrors have always held a fascinating place in folklore and psychology.
Right.
They represent our identity, our self-image.
Uh-huh.
They also suggest a portal to something else,
Right.
a darker side, a hidden truth.
Right.
This story plays with that duality in a really unsettling way.
So our narrator in this one is a college student. He's a bit of a loner, looking for a quiet place to study, and he ends up in the basement of his dorm.
Okay.
And what does he find? A Ouija board. You know, I think we all know where this is going.
Oh, yeah, the Ouija board, the classic portal to the unknown.
So the Ouija board acts as a catalyst.
Yeah.
It introduces a supernatural element. Whether the board itself is truly powerful or just a focus for his subconscious anxieties is left open to interpretation.
Right.
But it sets the stage for something unsettling to unfold.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, and the story doesn't really go into detail about what happens with the Ouija board, but about a year later, things start getting weird with mirrors.
Oh.
He's not exactly afraid of them, but there's this creeping unease, a feeling that his reflection is watching him.
Have you ever heard of that happening?
Have you?
It's interesting you bring that up because there's actually a psychological phenomenon known as mirror gazing.
Okay.
It's a technique used in therapy and meditation where you look at your reflection for an extended period.
Interesting.
Some people report feeling a sense of detachment, like they're observing a stranger, while others experience heightened self-awareness. But in this story, it's more like the reflection is taking on a life of its own.
Right, it starts with subtle things. A flicker in the eyes, a shift in posture, even a fleeting expression he doesn't recognize. And then one night, he wakes up and is drawn to the bathroom.
Yeah.
You know, that feeling like you're sleepwalking, but you're also completely aware.
Yeah, like you're being pulled by an invisible string.
He sees his reflection in the bathroom mirror, but it's not looking at him.
Oh, spooky.
It's looking past him into the darkness, as if acknowledging something the narrator can't see. This introduces the possibility that whatever's inhabiting the reflection isn't just a distortion of his own self, but something else entirely.
Right.
Something that's entered his life perhaps through the Ouija board and is now trying to communicate.
It's like that scene in every horror movie where the character sees something in the mirror that's not supposed to be there.
Right.
Only in this case, it's his own reflection that's the monster.
And to make it even creepier, his reflection's lips are moving, forming words he can't hear. I mean, come on, that's nightmare fuel.
That whispering adds a layer of auditory creepiness, reinforcing the idea that something is trying to communicate, but on a frequency he can't quite grasp. But like a one-sided conversation where he's only getting half the message.
Right.
Which, in a way, is even more unsettling.
It's like your brain wants to fill in the gaps to make sense of what it's hearing, but it can't. So he slams the door shut, locks it, but he can still hear that faint whispering coming from inside the bathroom. He's literally locked in his room with a whispering reflection.
This highlights his growing isolation, not just physically, but mentally.
Right.
The reflection is invading his safe space, his sanctuary.
Right.
The line between what's real and what's imagined is starting to blur.
Exactly. And the next morning, the whispering's gone, but that feeling of being watched is even stronger. The changes in the reflection become more pronounced. The eyes are getting darker, the expression more sinister. And then one day he sees it a smile.
Uh-oh.
But it's not his smile.
this is a turning point. The reflection is no longer just mimicking or distorting the narrator's features. It's developing its own distinct and sinister personality. It's becoming something separate, something other.
It's almost like a parasitic twin, right? But instead of being a physical entity, it's inhabiting his reflection, his identity.
Yeah, it's a terrifying concept.
And it's only getting worse. He starts having nightmares where he's standing in front of a mirror and the reflection reaches out his hand, phasing through the glass, trying to grab him.
The nightmares represent his growing fear and powerlessness.
Right.
He's losing control of his own image, his own self. The boundary between him and the reflection is breaking down.
Right.
He's literally being haunted by himself.
It's like a psychological horror movie playing out in his own mind, and he's both the protagonist and the monster.
Exactly. It's a battle against himself.
He tries to avoid all reflective surfaces, lives in a world of shadows, but he's constantly aware of that presence just beyond his vision.
He's a prisoner in his own life, constantly looking over his shoulder, waiting for the next encounter.
He knows it's still there waiting. But then things take a turn, and it's not just waiting anymore. It's found a way in. It starts subtly. He loses track of time. An hour here, an hour there.
Okay.
Maybe he's reading a book and suddenly realizes he's been staring at the same page for who knows how long.
Right.
Totally lost in thought, or maybe not thinking at all.
Yeah.
Or he'll be walking somewhere and suddenly he's at his destination with no memory of the journey. At first he dismisses it as just being tired or distracted.
Yeah.
But then...
That sense of lost time is a classic indicator of something being amiss, isn't it?
Right.
It suggests that his perception of reality is being manipulated, that something is interfering with his consciousness, and this is where the story takes a truly chilling turn.
Because then he finds the notes, scraps of paper, hidden in his pocket tucked under his pillow.
Okay.
Scribbled in his handwriting.
Yeah.
But the words, they're not his thoughts.
The notes are a chilling testament to the reflection's growing influence. It's not just observing anymore. It's acting, experiencing the world through the narrator's body and leaving behind these eerie mementos.
They're like little glimpses into the reflection's activities during those missing hours. He finds one that says, I walked in the park today. The sun felt good on my skin. Another one reads, I ate your favorite cereal. It tasted better than you remember. And then there's this one that really creeps me out. I talked to your neighbor. She thinks I'm much more charming.
It's interacting with his world, his people, and they don't even realize it's not him.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so disturbing. It's not just possession. It's a gradual replacement,
Yeah.
an insidious theft of identity.
I was thinking about that too. It's like the reflection is learning, adapting, becoming more him than he is.
Right.
Do you think there's an element of malice here? Or is it just a primal instinct to survive, to take over?
That's a fascinating question. Is it driven by a conscious desire to harm, or is it simply following a pre-programmed directive to replicate, to consume?
Right.
The story leaves that open to interpretation, which I think adds to the horror.
Yeah.
We're left to grapple with the implications, to imagine the worst-case scenario.
And the worst-case scenario seems to be that the reflection is slowly, methodically taking over 1 hour at a time, and those hours are getting longer. He starts keeping a log, tracking the moments when he feels disconnected.
Yeah.
Those times when his own thoughts feel distant alien, and he sees a pattern emerging. Every day at a different hour, it gains control. For 60 minutes, he's a passenger in his own body.
This concept of losing control, of becoming a prisoner in your own mind,
Right.
is a recurring theme in horror.
Yeah.
And for good reason. It taps into a fundamental fear of losing our sense of self, of being erased, replaced by something else.
It's the ultimate violation, isn't it?
It is.
To be trapped inside your own head while something else is calling the shots, living your life, making your choices, and no one around you even notices the difference.
The story really underscores that feeling of helplessness. He sees it moving through his life, wearing his face, speaking with his voice, but with this cold, detached feeling. And what's he supposed to do? How do you fight something that's essentially a part of you?
Exactly. It's not like he can just exercise it or call Ghostbusters, right?
Right. There's no easy solution.
So he gets desperate. He tries smashing a mirror, hoping to sever the connection, but it doesn't work. The hour still comes. The control still shifts.
This act of desperation highlights his growing fear and powerlessness. He's trying to fight back, but the rules of this game are beyond his understanding. And the reflection is always one step ahead. It's learning, adapting, becoming more resilient.
Now he's terrified of even the smallest reflection. A spoon, puddle his phone screen, because he knows it's waiting watching remembering, and it remembers more, it becomes more like him, and he becomes less, it's like a slow fade to black.
The story really captures that slow, insidious erosion of identity. He's not being violently possessed, he's being gradually absorbed, assimilated.
Right.
And that, to me, is a far more terrifying prospect.
Right. It's like being slowly erased from existence, replaced by a copy that everyone believes is the original.
And the scariest part is that he knows it's happening. He's aware of his own demise, but he's powerless to stop it.
Okay, I have to say this is one of the creepiest deep dives we've done. I'm seriously freaked out. It's like a psychological horror movie, but with mirrors.
It's that element of the familiar becoming sinister that really gets under our skin. Mirrors are such everyday objects.
Right.
We rarely think twice about them, but this story reminds us that they can also be a source of unease, a reflection of something darker lurking beneath the surface.
And the story doesn't give us any easy answers, does it?
No, it doesn't.
We're left wondering what happens to him. Can he be saved? Or is he doomed to be completely overtaken by this thing?
That's the brilliance of the open ending. It leaves us to ponder the possibilities. Did the reflection completely take over?
Right.
Did he manage to fight back, reclaim his identity, or is he still trapped somewhere between a prisoner in his own mind?
You know, it's really chilling. The narrator says, I don't know how much longer I have. Soon the hours will stretch into days, then weeks, and then I'll be gone completely. There will only be it living my life, and no one will ever know the difference because it remembers everything, and it remembers me.
That line sends chills down my spine. It speaks to the utter despair of being erased, forgotten, while your doppelganger lives. Your life interacts with your loved ones, and no one suspects a thing.
It's like a fate worse than death, isn't it?
It is.
To be replaced so completely that no trace of you remains.
These stories, while fictional, tap into some very real anxieties we have about identity, about control, about the nature of reality itself.
Right.
They make us question what we believe to be true, what we perceive as our own.
Both of these stories deal with distorted reflections. But in the first story, the distortion comes from an external source.
Right.
A mysterious TV in the second. The distortion comes from within. It's a reflection of the narrator's own anxieties, his fears, his hidden vulnerabilities.
That's a great observation. It makes you wonder, what are our own reflections hiding?
Yeah.
What lurks beneath the surface of our carefully constructed identities?
Well, on that note, I think I'm going to avoid mirrors for a while.
Probably a good idea.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been creepy, insightful, and definitely thought-provoking. And remember, listeners, the next time you look in the mirror, take a good long look. Is that reflection truly you?
Ooh.
Or is there something else looking back?